This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, last class we are dealing with the complications of the peptic ulcer, and one good complication we have already covered is perforation. So, perforation of the peptic ulcer. Usually, what is the most common site of the perforation? It is usually in the duodenum, and that too at what level? At D1.
First part of
Okay, first part. D1 or first part of the duodenum. Okay, and how do you manage it?
if perforation, omentoplasty, if bleeding, ligate the vessel.
Okay. We are not up to bleeding now. We are only up to perforation. So we have seen three good complications of the peptic ulcer. One is perforation, second one is bleeding, third one is gastric outlet obstruction. Okay. So if there is a perforation, first we will resuscitate and revive the patient. Then we will plan for a emergency laparotomy where we identify the perforation and we do a primary repair. What is that? We do a hello. I can hear some noise from your side. Please block the sound, please. So we will identify the perforation and we will do a modified Graham patch. That is, we will do a primary repair with the help of omentum. Okay. So in this class, we are going to see about the other two complications of the peptic ulcer. One is that is bleeding and gastric outlet obstruction. Okay. With these, we will complete most of our stomach except for the malignancy part. Okay, which I will be talking in the next class. Am I clear? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
See, I can hear some noise from your side. Please block that noise. Okay. So coming to the bleeding peptic ulcer. So usually bleeding can occur in the anterior ulcer perforates, posterior ulcer bleeds. Okay. So this bleeding peptic ulcer, these are most commonly associated with the NSAID, increased NSAID uptake. Okay, and increased age, you most commonly see this complication. Okay, so we can diagnose it endoscopically. If so, initially we'll start up with PPIs or your H2 antagonist, and with the help of endoscopy, we can able to diagnose 70% of the bleed. So when we do a endoscopy, we can identify the bleed and we can do a adrenaline injection. Now we will just try to cauterize it. We will touch with the heat probe or we can apply a hemoclip. Okay. So we will first try to do a less invasive procedure rather than directly going for surgery. So what is that? We will first do it. What is our gold standard here? What is our a good hand in our hand? That is endoscopy. So with the help of endoscopy, we will try to locate it. We will try to stop it by with the help of some adrenal injections or by applying some diathermy or heater probe or by applying some hemoclips. If still the source of bleeding is not identified, then we can plan for a angiography. Okay, with the help of angiography, you can identify the location of the bleed and you can plan a transcatheter embolization. Okay, but this endoscopy cauterization, these may not hold good for large vessel bleeds. Okay, in such cases, you have to plan for a emergency surgery. But at the same time, the morbidity and mortality is also very high if you come across a bleed from a larger source or large vessel. Okay, so if so if even after control with an endoscopy, okay, if it still rebleeds or if you can't identify it, then you can plan for angiography and can plan for a transcatheter embolization. Then when you will plan for surgical management. Okay, so when it is still continuously bleeding or if there is a significant rebleed or If you come, if so, what if through endoscopy, if you find a visible vessel at the ulcer base, if there is a spurting vessel which you can't catch up with a hemoclip, or if there is an ulcer with a clot in the base, or if the patient is continuously bleeding and you are transfusing more than 6 units of blood. These are all the indications when you have to do a surgical intervention. See, when with all your interventive measures you have not able to control, or if there is a rebleed, or you can find out a visible vessel in the in the ulcer, if there is a spurting vessel, or if there is a clot in the base of the ulcer, or if the patient is requiring more than 6 units of blood, then you have to plan for a surgical management. Okay, so most commonly where will be the bleeding is from? At the D1. And what is the artery involved?
Duodenum.
Yes, gastroduodenal.
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 So initially, before opening up the duodenum, you have to mobilize the entire. So duodenum is a fixed part, right? So you have to mobilize the duodenum before performing duodenostomy. Okay. So then after mobilization, you will open up the duodenum, or you can pylorus and the duodenum, and you will identify the bleeding part. You will control, or you'll bring hemostasis with the help of direct pressure, or by taking a underrunning suture around the vessel. So after the bleeding is controlled, you will close the mucosa of the ulcer. Then you will do a pylorodiotomy. So you know what is pyloroplasty? How you will open vertically and close transversely. Okay. So you will identify the vessel, apply pressure or apply a overrunning suture, then try to close the mucosa of the ulcer, then close the duodenectomy, or close the duodenum. Okay, that is for in surgical part. So if there is a giant ulcer, okay, if the ulcer is very big, then you may not approximate the mucosa. The D1 is much deformed. Then in such cases, so primary closure can't be, the mucosa can't be primarily closed. In such cases, you will plan for a distal gastrectomy and Roux-en-Y reconstruction. Okay, so uh, this is the thing what you will plan for in case of bleeding peptic ulcer. So immediately post-operative, what is most important? You have to inhibit the source of the acid production. So post-op acid inhibition is very important. Okay, this is about bleeding peptic ulcers. So be cautious. So first you will try to locate it with the help of endoscopy, and through endoscopic therapeutically you will try to control it either by clips or not. Even if it is not controlled, in higher centers, you can plan for angiography and plan for transcatheter embolization. Even if with all these measures, patient is still rebleeding, you can find a spurting vessel or visible vessel or a clot in the base, or the patient is requiring more than 6 units, plan for a surgery, open the abdomen, do a duodenotomy, then catch hold of the vessel, or do a catch hold of the vessel and control it, acquire hemostasis, and post-operatively, what is important? We have to put the patients on PPI or H2 antisecretory agents. Okay, then apart from this peptic ulcer, what are the other causes? There are so many other causes which causes upper GI bleed. One is erosions or your gastritis or anything related to the peptic ulcer, either in the esophagus or in the stomach or in the duodenum. Okay, the next, these are the causes of upper GI. Apart from those, what are the other causes of this upper GI bleed? One is stress ulcer. Okay, when do you see the stress ulcer? Yes. So when
During
the patient
exam.
is in ICU, during exam, okay. When the patient is in ICUs. Okay, after prolonged patient is suffering from long-standing morbidity or in ICUs. Okay, these patients may develop stress ulcers. So, but now as a routine practice, the incidence of stress ulcers has gradually declined. Why? As a routine practice, we are keeping the patients in ICUs or prolonged bed rest on PPIs. So, this is decreasing the incidence of stress ulcers because of the prophylactic use of PPIs. So, what is important here? Acid inhibition, acid inhibitory drugs, and we will administer sucralfate with the help of NG tube or orally, so that the incidence of these can be decreased. Okay, but if at all endoscopic if bleeding occurs, it is very difficult to control. Okay, then gastric erosions with the increased usage of these NSAIDs. Okay, the gastric erosions are also increasing nowadays. So usually they settle spontaneously, but if this one also, if this is not controlled, this is also very difficult to control. Then coming to Mallory-Weiss tear. What is this Mallory-Weiss tear?
Due to severe vomitings,
Ah,
mucosa and submucosal tears.
yes. Okay. Due to strenuous, a very effortful vomitings. Okay. Due to strenuous and repeated vomitings, there happens a longitudinal tear in the GE junction. Okay. So remember, it occurs at the GE junction, and during endoscopy, it is very difficult for us to identify the location. Okay. So it's a longitudinal tear in the GE junction due to repetitive and strenuous vomitings. Okay. Usually, most of the time, there is not much amount of hematemesis, but if hematemesis occurs, okay, it may require management. Okay, so what you will do, you will do a longitudinal gastrostomy, or you will open the so most of the surgeons, what they will do, they will perform an on table endoscopy, so it is easy for them to isolate. So prior planning before opening the stomach is much easier for any one of us. So perform an endoscopy, try to isolate it or locate it, then you will open the stomach, do a gastrotomy, and identify the tear. So what happens if there is a tear? There will be some induration around the tear. So palpate it and identify the tear and do a, if there is a bleeding from that side, you do a underrunning sutures, okay, and control the bleeding. So this is about Mallory-Weiss tear. So it is a longitudinal tear in the GE junction due to strenuous vomitings. Okay, then what is this? Dialyphos disease or dialyphos lesions. Okay, what is this dialyphos lesion? It is nothing but, yes, submucosal gastric AV malformations. Okay, it is most difficult to treat. Why? Because when normally there is no bleeding from the lesion, okay, it is the when you perform an endoscopy, you can't even able to identify where the lesion is because it is covered with the normal mucosa. So when there is no bleeding, it is not at all visible. If there is a bleeding, we will still could not sometimes be able to make out the lesion. Okay, because we could see just bleeding from the mucosa, from a normal mucosal site. Okay, so it is highly difficult to locate the lesion. So we can do an endoscopy. If you are able to identify it, do a injection sclerotherapy, or you will inject a sclerosant into the lesion, or you can apply a chemo clip. If it is not feasible, then you will open it and you will do a local excision. Okay, this is about dialyphos disease. So it is nothing but it is gastric submucosal AV malformation, which has normal look on a endoscopy, and only you can identify. Even on bleeding, you could not able to make out the lesion. Okay. Then coming to tumors. Tumors. Most of the gastric tumors can present with acute or chronic present with acute or chronic bleeding. Okay, so mostly stromal tumors may present with hematemesis or melena. Okay, why? Because the the tumor present, so the mucosa present of the tumor, they break up and present with either hematemesis or melena. So remember, melena is a manifestation of upper GI bleed, not so upper GI bleed in the sense up to ligament of Treves. Anything below the ligament of Treves comes under lower GI bleed. Okay. So melena is a manifestation of upper GI bleed. Then coming to portal hypertension and gastropathy. Okay. So portal hypertension bleeds, the variceal bleeds, that is either gastric varices or your esophageal varices. The treatment is very challenging. Okay, most of the times the bleed is from the esophageal varices in case of portal hypertension. Okay, so you can do a sclerotherapy. You can inject the scleros and you can plan for a banding. You will pass a rubber band like thing, and you can catch hold of the bleeding, that is banding, or you can do a balloon tamponade. So there will be there are different tubes like Sensac and Blackmore tube. Okay, so what it will have deflated balloons. So you insert that tube and you can inflate it. So with inflation, it will have pressure over the bleeding source and it can stop the bleeding. Okay, so what happens because of the increased portal pressure? Okay, the mucosa affected exudes blood. Okay, so that is the reason why there is bleeding either in the esophageal varices or in the gastric varices. So you can control this with the help of endoscopic guided sclerotherapy or banding or with the help of the balloon tamponade. Okay, then comes your iotoenteric fistula, last but not the least. So always when nothing is made out, you have to make a DD of iotoenteric fistula also has to be remembered in mind. That is, there is a communication between the bowel and the aorta. So patient can present with hematemesis or melena. So anytime the cause of hematemesis or melena is not made out, you should keep your aortoenteric fistula in mind also. So patient will have history of aortic graft. Most of the patients they tell a history of aortic graft. Rarely the cause can be because of untreated aortic aneurysm. So you will do a CT and identify the site of the fistula. So it is highly dealt with the hands of vascular surgeon than a general surgeon. So these are the different causes of other causes of upper GI bleed other than your peptic ulcer. So stress ulceration, gastric corrosions, Mallory-Weiss tear. What is this Mallory-Weiss tear? Yes, it is a tear in the longitudinal tear in the GE junction. Then
French vomiting.
disease. Ralphus disease is submucosal AV malformation. You can see upper GI bleed in case of tumors, portal hypertension and gastropathy, and iotoenteric fistula is the least thing we have to keep in mind. Okay, this is all about bleeding, the upper GI bleed and the complication of peptic ulcer, bleeding peptic ulcer. Then the third complication seen in peptic ulcer disease is gastric outlet obstruction. Okay, so what is this gastric outlet obstruction? So what are the most common causes of gastric outlet obstruction? So gastric outlet obstruction can be congenital, which is seen in children, but usually the most common causes of gastric outlet obstruction is pyloric stenosis, secondary to peptic ulcer, and the other is gastric cancer. Nowadays, the trend of pyloric stenosis secondary to peptic ulcer is decreasing because of the increased usage of our PPIs. So always in a present scenario, patient present with GOO, we have to definitely rule out a malignancy. Remember. Okay. So pyloric stenosis is not a true word. It's a misnomer just because there is no actual stenosis at the pylorus. There is also a true pyloric stenosis where we can make out a fibrosis around the pyloric channel. Okay, but this is a misnomer. Here, usually, what happens? There will be deformity of the duodenal cap, and there is obstruction at the D1, which presents with the deformity in the D1, which what we call as pyloric stenosis. Okay, then then, so how does the patient come to us? Okay, if the patient is having, if the cause is due to a peptic ulcer, patient will give a history of prolonged usage of PPIs or prolonged APD features. Okay, patient is suffering from long-standing cases of long-standing acid peptic disease or peptic ulcer. Okay, then patient can complain of unremitting pain sometimes. Okay, there will be vomiting, which is sometimes which is very discomfort to the the smell because if the food is retaining in the stomach, the so what happens, there is a obstruction at the level of pylorus, so the food you are taking in is not passing beyond the pylorus. Okay, so bad ordered vomiting, and because of vomiting the patient is stopped taking food. Okay, so there is loss of weight, and because of continuous vomiting, patient can end up in dehydration. So remember one thing, here vomiting is always bile, there is no bile stain. Okay, because the obstruction is above D2. So there is no bile staining. So non-bilious vomiting, unremitting pain in the abdomen, patient can present with dehydration and with leading to loss of weight, and with a history, previous history of peptic ulcer. These are all suggestive towards chronic peptic ulcer. Okay, so then how you can so you have taken history, now you have to confirm your history. You will do some clinical examination. Okay, you can clearly, when you examine the abdomen, you can clearly see a visible peristalsis. The peristalsis from left, hello, from left to right. Then what is this? Succession splash. Yes, what is the succession splash? When you hold both sides of the chest just below the rib cage, and you keep a and you just move the abdomen, you can see the contents of the stomach moving to and fro. So that is called the, you can hear, that is succession splash. And what is this auscultative percussion? In auscultative percussion, what you will do, usually not in normal individuals, the greater curvature of the stomach will be above the umbilicus. But in gastric outlet obstruction, the greater curvature will be beyond the level of the umbilicus. So in order to identify, this is all in your exam. If you are given a case of gastric outlet obstruction, you have to do all these tests. So succession splash is positive. Or then you have to do auscultative percussion. So auscultative percussion, what you will do, you will keep your stethoscope and you will mark the borders. See, when the stomach is full, what will be the sound like? It will be dull. Okay, so you will you will identify the plane where the dull note is turning into resonant, and you will mark all those sides. So this all these markings tell us the greater curvature of the stomach. So in gastric outlet obstruction, the greater curvature will be beyond the level of the umbilicus. Okay, so this is called as auscultative percussion. Okay, so these are the features of gastric outlet obstruction. And coming to the metabolic abnormalities, okay, these are very important. Because of continuous vomitings, there will be loss of acid from the stomach. So patient will land up in hypochloremic alkalosis. Your HCl is gone, so chloride is gone. Okay, H plus ions are gone. So there will be hypochloremic alkalosis. So what does this alkalosis do? They decrease the calcium absorption. They decrease the low. It decreases the calcium. So patient will land up in tetany. It's otherwise called gastric tetany. Okay. So initially, the electrolytes like sodium and potassium will be normal. But as your dehydration increases, what happens? Okay, the in uh, in uh, in urine the chloride levels will be low and there will be high amounts of bicarb. See, hypochloremic alkalosis. So the chloride levels will be less and bicarb will be more. So this bicarb they excrete with sodium. Okay, so the patient will land up in hyponatremia. Okay, this bicarb try to escape out with the sodium, so patient will land up in hyponatremia. Okay, so uh, hello, hyponatremia, and as dehydration proceeds, what happens? The kidneys will trying to retain the sodium. Okay, so in place of sodium, what will happen? Your potassium and hydrogen ions will be get excreted. So this is the cause for your paradoxical aciduria, okay, and hypokalemia in gastric outlet obstruction. Because of vomitings, there will be hypochloremic alkalosis. Then the high bicarb tries to go away from urine with the help of sodium. Then hyponatremia sets in. Because of hyponatremia, the kidneys try to retain sodium and sodium, because of which your potassium and hydrogen ions are excreted. That is the reason why there is paradoxical aciduria and hypokalemia. Okay, so this is the metabolic abnormality seen in case of gastric outlet obstruction secondary to peptic ulcer. But in case of gastric cancer, remember there will be hypochlorhydria and echlorhydria rather than this abnormality. Okay. So in gastric outlet obstruction secondary to peptic ulcer, remember what is the metabolic abnormality? Hypochloremic alkalosis with hypokalemia and paradoxical aciduria. Okay. Then how are you going to treat this gastric outlet obstruction? So first prime importance is patient is in dehydration. Patient is having some metabolic abnormalities or your deficiencies. All the metabolic abnormalities have to be corrected first. So first you rehydrate the patient, give him IV saline. You keep the patient on normal saline with potassium, KCl administration. So this will correct the metabolic abnormalities. Okay, so for initially because of metabolic abnormalities, patient look like patient is there will be he's having high amounts of hemoglobin. Now patient may have anemia. If the patient is having anemia, correct the anemia. Okay, then you put on a Ryle's tube or nasogastric tube, and you aspirate all the content present inside the stomach. You give a thorough stomach wash. Okay, so gastric lavage. So you remove all the contents in the stomach. So even until you do this, you cannot able to pass a endoscope, because if you pass an endoscope, if the stomach is completely contaminated with the food, you can't appreciate anything. You can't pass the scope beyond the level. So the prime reason for doing the gastric lavage is that. So after doing gastric lavage, you do a endoscopy and find out the cause of obstruction. Is that a tumor or is that a chronic duodenal ulcer? So usually duodenal ulcers, there is no need to do a biopsy, but somewhere in the stomach, definitely you have to perform a biopsy to rule out malignancy. Okay, so if it is an ulcer, try him with conservative management. But if there is a good amount of obstruction, it may not get corrected with conservative management. Then you have to plan for a diversion procedure. You can do a gastrojejunostomy, or sometimes you have to plan with a truncal vagotomy. If it is secondary to malignancy, you will do a the plan of management differs. Okay, you have to plan for a gastrectomy. Okay, that's okay. So gastroenterostomy is with or without. Mostly in our setup we do a truncal rhegotomy with gastrojejunostomy. Then balloon dilatations. Balloon dilatations is not always successful. Okay, sometimes it may lead to perforation, mostly in the duodenum. Then if it is a malignancy, you have to do a appropriate resectional surgery. This is about your gastric outlet obstruction secondary to peptic ulcer or secondary to malignancy. So apart from these, there are other causes of, so gastric outlet obstruction can be a essay question for you. So they may ask what are the causes of gastric outlet obstruction, and so one is your peptic ulcer, chronic duodenal ulcer. Then second one is gastric malignancy, and you can even write as congenital pyloric stenosis. Okay. Then apart from congenital pyloric stenosis, you have adult pyloric stenosis. So this is a very rare condition. So usually patients with the adult pyloric stenosis, they have problems with gastric emptying. So there will be delayed gastric emptying. So in case of congenital pyloric stenosis, what you'll do a Ramstead surgery, that is pyloromyotomy. But here you don't do any pyloromyotomy. Instead, you can plan for a pyloroplasty. So in adult pyloric stenosis, you do pyloroplasty. Then the other cause of gastric outlet obstruction is pyloric mucosal diaphragm. Okay. So there will be a diaphragm, a membrane-like thing which is causing obstruction. So this is usually does not become obvious until the patient enters his middle life. Okay, just simple excision of the diaphragm is sufficient. Okay, so you're just some diaphragm, some membrane-like thing is hindering the passage of food. So you're removing that membrane. That is about pyloric mucosal diaphragm. Okay, this is one of the cause of gastric outlet obstruction. Then what are the other conditions which can cause a gastric? One is some obstruction due to hair or obstruction due to some plant materials, that is trichobezoar or phytobezoar. So this obstruction is mainly seen in psychiatric, not normal individuals, usually psychiatric patients. So trichobezoar, in the sense you can appreciate in the picture, this is a trichobezoar. So psychiatric illness patients usually they ingest hair. Okay, so pathological ingestion of the hair which remains undigested, they go and obstruct the lumen of the stomach. So it can lead to ulceration, it can present as GI bleed, it can perforate, or it can cause obstruction. Usually we can diagnose it with the help of endoscopy or with the help of X-ray, where the obstruction features can be clearly evident. So the treatment is only one, that is open the abdomen, open the stomach, and you remove the trichobezoar or phytobezoar. So phytobezoar is nothing but vegetable matter, and trichobezoar is nothing but hair. Okay. Then is foreign body. Foreign bodies, usually what happens, most of the time, any foreign body that is reaching the stomach will automatically pass away. Any foreign body that is in between the stomach and the mouth, that is somewhere in the esophagus, can cause obstruction. But once a foreign body enters into the stomach, usually it passes away. There usually does not hinder the or usually does not cause much damage. Only so in all such cases, when the foreign body has reached the stomach, we can just wait and watch. Only if it is causing symptoms, only then we have to plan for surgery. Okay, so so even this foreign body intake also, they are also having some psychiatric problems. Then the other cause is volvulus of the stomach. What do you mean by volvulus? Rotation of the stomach. Hello. Are you there? So what do you mean by volvulus? It is rotating of the stomach around its own axis. Okay, there will be two fixed points. One is at the cardia, other at the pylorus. Okay, so around the two fixed points, the stomach is rotating on itself. Okay, so rotation of the stomach usually occurs around the axis and between the two fixed points, that is cardia and the pylorus. Okay, so this rotation can occur either horizontally, that is organoaxial, or vertically, that is mesenteroaxial. Okay, most of the time, this stomach volvulus is associated with a large diaphragmatic defect. Okay, left diaphragmatic hernia. So what happens along with the stomach? There will be pools. There will be loop of transverse colon in the left side of the chest. So patient will have difficulty while eating. Sometimes because of the compromise of the vasculature, patient may present with ischemia, signs of ischemia. So you will, so in such cases, our endoscopy is not much helpful here. In such cases, our chest X-ray or X-ray, erect abdomen X-ray, or combined with the chest is more helpful than endoscopy. Okay, so you can appreciate the volvulus in this picture. See, there is partial filling this side and this side, and here in between there is narrowing. Okay, so what you will plan here? So definitely surgery is the only option left behind. Okay, because there is some contents in the chest wall. You have to reduce it. Okay, you have to take all the contents back into the abdomen. The diaphragm defect is closed. Sometimes with a most of the time now we are planning all diaphragmatic hernias repair with a mesh. Okay, so the diaphragmatic defect is closed. Then they will separate the stomach from the colon and you will fix the stomach. That is gastropexy. Okay, this is about your gastric volvulus. So gastric volvulus, remember, when does a volvulus occur? When there are two fixed points and rotating around its own axis. Okay, so it is usually associated with a diaphragmatic defect. And what you will do, you have definitive management is only surgery. That is, you will reduce all the contents, do a primary repair of the diaphragm, cover with a mesh, and separate the colon from the stomach and do a gastropexy. Okay, this is about stomach volvulus. So these are all the different causes of gastric outlet obstruction. One is congenital. Second one is adult pyloric stenosis. Next is our peptic ulcer, that is chronic duodenal ulcer. Then most common causes chronic duodenal ulcer and gastric malignancy. Then congenital adult pyloric stenosis, pyloric diaphragm. Then it can be secondary to phytobazar or trichobazar, sometimes because of foreign body. Then is volvulus. These are all, you can write everything. These are all present with obstruction. Okay, so you can write all this under obstruction, causes of obstruction. Then bit mentioned about acute gastric dilatation. This occurs in association with the pyloroduodenal conditions, or post-operatively when you don't place when you have done something with the GI system and you have not placed so you have done an anastomosis. Okay, and you have not placed a NG tube. In such cases, patients can present with acute gastric dilatation. And these patients, they present with electrolyte imbalances. So if you have not intervened in time, patient will present with massive vomitings and urine vomiting. Patient will present with aspiration. So always do a nasogastric tube and provide adequate fluid management. And last topic, apart from the gastric malignancies, is a small note about gastric polyps, which is not mentioned in my notes. So most of so many conditions in the stomach can present with gastric polyps, but these are not always malignant. But early gastric cancer can present as polyp. Okay, so anywhere you find a polyp in the stomach, better is to go for a biopsy. Anything in the stomach, better go for a biopsy. There is nothing harm in performing a biopsy just to rule out a malignancy, because early gastric cancer can also present as polyps. Okay. So biopsy is the rule, and most commonly uh, polyps can be, the most common cause is either metaplastic, or they can be secondary to H. pylori infection. H. pylori, if it is secondary to H. pylori infection, if you put the patient on eradication therapy, okay, then immediately they will resolve. Sometimes it may be secondary to inflammation. Okay, so anything. So most of true adenomas, okay, true adenomas can have malignant potential, but they occupy only 10% of the gastric polyps. Okay, so and even gastric carcinoids, we have seen in the previous class also, there will be hyperproliferation of PCL cells which can present as polyps, small polyps. So there are different causes. So many conditions can present as, it can be simple. It can be a simple metaplastic lesion. It can be inflammatory. It can be secondary to infection with a H. pylori, or early gastric cancer can present as gastric polyp, or 10% of the may be associated with true adenomas. Okay, so as true adenomas can have malignant potential, so if you are suspecting any polyp, better to do a biopsy, or you can do a polypectomy either with an endoscopy or open search. This is about your uh, peptic ulcer and the remaining small topics in the stomach. I think with this we have completed today's class. And next class I will be telling about malignancies. Okay, stomach cancer. Okay, what is the time?
Yes, ma'am.
Time done. Finished. Yes. Okay. Any doubts? Yes.
No, ma'am.